One of the voices you hear on college basketball is Jay Bilas. He's been high on the Hogs and has a lot of optimism about next season. He joins us now here on the Morning Rush. Jay, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
We are doing well. Happy Easter weekend. I know recently you've had a lot of optimism about Arkansas heading into next year, and everyone trying to figure out who maybe are the teams to beat, the teams that are favored to be in the Final Four. Why are you so optimistic right now about a young Arkansas team next year?
Well, I mean, they've been to 2 Elite Eights in a row, which is pretty darn good. There's not a lot of teams that can claim that. They've also recruited really well. They've got 3 top prospects coming in, led by Anthony Black, and then depending on who comes back, I mean, you never really know at this time of the year, but if Audis Tony comes back and Jaylen Williams, I mean, there's a very good opportunity for Arkansas to be not only among the best teams in the country, but a chance to be the best team in the country, and that's pretty impressive.
When you watch Eric Musselman and the way he manages his team during a game and the way he's recruited, what's your thoughts on Eric Musselman, who is, really kind of still a fairly newer head coach in college basketball after a lot of professional experience?
Well, he's had a lot of college experience, too. I mean, I got to watch him closely when he was at Nevada, and he had great teams there and contending teams and recruited really well there. So it's not a surprise that, when you take what a lot of people would consider to be a step up, into the SEC, that he's recruited at even a higher level. Musselman's a really high energy coach, and he's a positive guy and a detail oriented guy. I mean, he throws a lot at those guys, and they absorb it. I mean, they're capable of absorbing it and acting upon it positively. So I've always been impressed with how Eric Musselman does it.
Jay, Clay Henry here. When you look at Duke and North Carolina going forward with new coaches, and obviously we saw results with the new coach this year at North Carolina, but where is North Carolina and Duke going to fit, in the national landscape? Is this in question how they're going to hold up without, these legendary coaches?
Well, it doesn't seem to be a question with North Carolina. They went to the championship game the first year after Roy Williams stepped aside, and they had basically the same team back. They added one different piece in Brady Manick, but other than that, all those guys were essentially there last year, and a team that had gotten blasted in the second round of the tournament last year, I believe. And that might have been the first round against Wisconsin. I think that was the 8-9 game, but whatever. Duke's going to be fine. I mean, those brand names don't go away. And so John Shire's recruited extraordinarily well. I think he's got 3 or 4 McDonald's All-Americans coming in and 5 top 50 players. That doesn't guarantee success, but it's a pretty good indicator that you're going to be good. So I don't anticipate either Duke or North Carolina going anywhere. And look, it's been a long time since Dean Smith was the head coach there, and they did extraordinarily well after Coach Smith. They won 3 championships under Roy Williams. And then Roy Williams leaves. They go to the championship game the first year. So I don't see those things changing. And look, some coaches obviously do better than others, but I think those 2 programs will stay at the forefront, not only in the ACC, but they'll be nationally relevant going forward.
Jay, when you take a look at SEC basketball and you kind of reflect back on what happened or didn't happen in the tournament in Arkansas, the last team standing, what's your opinion of where this league is at right now nationally in the Southeastern Conference when you compare the Kentuckys and the Auburns and the Tennessees to the top teams in the ACC or the Big Ten or the Big 12?
Huge step forward over the last probably 4 or 5 years, I'd say, for the Southeastern Conference. And it's always been an outstanding league, but I think this last year it was the best league in the country. But it didn't perform that way in the tournament. And part of that had to do with teams that didn't really peak at the end. I mean, Auburn did not play anywhere near its level, the level it had established during the season once it got toward the postseason. Tennessee did not play well in the tournament and lost early. And so you had a bunch of teams. Arkansas was really the only second weekend team, if I remember right. So only one team in the Sweet 16, and Arkansas made it the Elite Eight. But that doesn't, to some people who like facile interpretation, they'll say, well, see, they weren't that good. And I don't see it that way. Just like, the ACC is not all of a sudden a better league than the Southeastern Conferences last year just because they got 3 teams in the Elite Eight. It doesn't work that way. The Pac-12 did that last year. And it didn't make Oregon State a great team because they busted through and got to an Elite Eight. They had a good run. But those are 2 different things. So I think the SEC is in really good shape. It's going to be among the top 3 leagues, I think, for me in the foreseeable future. But those things can turn. It just depends on continuing to recruit. I mean, the league's got really good coaches, but the only way you stay at the top of the standings or rankings is if you got the best players. You can lose with great players, but you can't win without them. And that's really the key to any league is having top talent.
Is there something you see that, when you have teams that have played well all year, but it doesn't translate to the tournament, and we're talking about that kind of with a conference, is there something you see in the preparation for a tournament or something you see certain programs do to guard against that? What do you think are the keys to not having that letdown at the most important time?
Well, I don't know that it's a letdown. I think a lot of people had identified going toward the end of the season that Auburn was not playing as well. Their guards weren't shooting it as well. They had some offensive difficulties. Their defense was still really good, but that's the kind of the thing when people say defense wins championships. It wins championships when you can score. You have to score to win, and no team has ever won a championship without being able to score and defend. You have to do both. And the harder thing to do is defend because, players are always in tune with offense, in any sport. Everybody likes practicing offense more than defense. So coaches, they say defense wins championships, but, when Tennessee struggles, it's because they struggle to score. And Auburn struggled to score against Miami, and they had a difficult time matching up with some of Miami's playmakers. But there's no one thing. So your point about letdown, I get it, but it's not like everybody in the Southeastern Conference except Arkansas had a letdown. And the truth is, I know Musselman used this for fun, just me and Jimmy Fallon, I guess, which is pretty good company. But when you're in my role and you're looking for, people are saying, give us potential upsets, give us an upset. Well, I picked Vermont in that opening game to pull an upset. And, I know Arkansas fans got mad as if that matters. It doesn't matter who we pick. But my point there was to throw a little bit of credit at Vermont, who was really good. And what was that game, a 4-point game?
Yeah.
That was a 4-point game. And so if Vermont had hit a couple shots and Arkansas loses, it doesn't mean Arkansas wasn't the same team that ultimately went to the Elite Eight. Sometimes there's a fine line in some of these games, and in basketball, if you don't play your best, you can get beat. But the problem with it, when you got, I don't even remember how many teams out of the Southeastern Conference made it, but when say it's 8, when 7 of them lose, people are going to draw conclusions from that. And when you have a great year, you crow about it. And when you have a bad year like this in the tournament, it was a great year overall, but it was a bad year in the tournament. People are going to crow at you. That's kind of the way it goes.
Jay, when we watched, really, because Arkansas played Gonzaga in a great game, and the build up, and Eric talked a little bit about that. They felt like they had an advantage, that they were a tougher team. They'd played in a tougher conference. I love Mark Few, and I think they're going to win. But do they need to do anything different? And I know they play a tough non-conference schedule, but it's early. So can they get some relief from their conference to get a couple of games, later in the year?
Yes, they can, but, I don't buy your premise. Because if you look over the course of the last, it's the last 20 years really, but especially the last 10, nobody has won more tournament games than Gonzaga. And how are they doing that if they're not tough enough? Look, I get whatever a coach says to his team, and I'm fine with Eric Musselman saying, "Hey, we're tougher, we played better competition." we've played in more close games, so we'll know how to function at the end of the game. That's what you tell your team. Doesn't make it true, because if that were a 7-game series, I'm not sure Arkansas would have gone on. They might have, but it wasn't. They played 1 game. But you can't go. So Gonzaga loses in the Sweet 16 this year to Arkansas. They don't lose in the Sweet 16 very often. They've been in 2 of the last 4 championships games going into this one, and they've been in all these Elite Eights and Sweet 16s. They've made like 7 or 8 straight Sweet 16s. And if all these other leagues are so damn tough, how come they're not doing that? That's what I'd like to know. Like, if they're so tough, why haven't they done it? And Gonzaga's doing it consistently. And so I respect the question. I don't buy it for 1 second.
So just keep on doing what they're doing, and they'll break through eventually, right?
Well, you could ask the question about a lot of programs. Like all these programs you're talking about, how many championships have they won? It's been and I'm talking to you in Arkansas. When was the last time Arkansas won a championship? 94?
94, yeah.
94.
Well, that's a long time. And Arkansas is a great, proud program. But I'm telling you, that's how difficult it is. But Gonzaga's had 2 of the last 4. They lost to Carolina in 17, maybe it's 2 of the last 5. But we had the COVID year, so I'm losing count. Yeah, they lost by a bucket. And it's, to me, some of this stuff, you start going, it's getting a little nitpicky. Not that you are. It's a fair, I respect your question. I just don't buy into that premise.
Well, I think everybody's talking about it. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Well, they're not talking. I don't hear it from basketball people questioning why Gonzaga.
Yeah, I'm talking about fans.
I hear it.
Yeah.
Well, fans. Fans are great, but they don't always ask the right questions. It's sort of like the thing about saying, "Hey, tell me how great the SEC was this year." That's fan talk and what I would call facile interpretation. The league, individual teams did not perform to the level they had shown during the season. But that doesn't mean the league sucked. That's not right. And you can't say, well, St. Peter's made the Elite Eight and Arkansas made the Elite Eight. The only teams out of their conference. That doesn't make the MAC as good as the Southeastern Conference. That's not the way this stuff works. That's my point. And it's the same thing with Gonzaga. Arkansas beat them this year, but if you look at the last 20 years, tell me who's performed at a higher level in the tournament, Arkansas or Gonzaga.
Yeah, I don't want to play them. That's the bottom line.
But it's true. But it's true. So their schedule has nothing to do with whether they won or lost the game against Arkansas this year. They play everybody, and their league was really good this year. I think they had 4 teams in the tournament this year.
Jay, let me ask you this before you go. Jaylen Williams has got a critical decision. He's put his name in the draft. He's got to decide to stay or go. When you look at Arkansas's forward and Jaylen Williams, what do you see and evaluate whether or not he should stay in the NBA draft process or whether he should return to college?
He should do whatever he wants to do. If he's ready to become a pro and to devote the next part of his life to professional basketball, then he should go. And but if he enjoys what he's doing now, if he wants to wait a little while before he takes that next step, then stay. I don't think it's necessarily a decision as to whether he is completely and fully developed and prepared to play in the NBA right now, because there are a lot of really good options to develop. And people look at the G League as a negative, and it's not. If you're devoted to being a professional right now and devoted to working on your game, NBA only, the G League is a magnificent way to develop. And we've seen a ton of players go out of the G League into the NBA. But part of the decision may be based on where he's expected to be drafted. That's not an unimportant factor. And then his readiness, both his game and sort of his maturity level socially, whether he wants to do that. So I don't ever quarrel with the decision of a player. because it's individual in every way. And there's no way, like, everybody will look back and say, well, he should have stayed, should have gone, all these different things. Armando Bacot decided to come back at North Carolina. That's great. And I think it's great that he made his own decision and what's best for him. But that doesn't make him right and someone else wrong. And on the flip side, if he had gone pro, he wouldn't have necessarily been right or wrong in that. So I wouldn't imagine giving any advice to Jaylen Williams. He's an outstanding player and a terrific young man. And one thing that's great now is you can go and work out for these teams and then still come back if you want to. And I think that's a real positive for everybody.
Jay, thanks for your time. We hope that maybe Arkansas can get in a position where college basketball game days in Fayetteville soon. We'd love to see you then. Have a great Easter weekend.
Well, we'd love to come out. Thank you for having me.
Is your number one source for all your betting needs, sports info, and odds. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's odds for the Masters Championship and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so join today. Learn why everyone is saying BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on popular sports and games. Bet online, where the game starts.